Today's story is titled, Please Do Not Shatter Me, by Niall Mector. The link to the story is in the description below. Please enjoy. Motionless, I sat beside the dumpster, watching the common folk amble past the alleyway. I knew not what happened to trash once it was thrown away, and I was frightened to find out. Mercifully, salvation intercepted my ordained path. She was neither holy girl nor holy woman, appearing suspended in that uncertain age between the two. Her gaze swept over me once, and when I was nearly certain I would be overlooked, her eyes returned to me with sudden attention. Nearer and nearer she came, surveying the damage to my body, then promptly ignoring it, hoisting me up into her arms such that I was looking past her shoulder and carrying me out of the alleyway, hugging me close by my waist. The weather that afternoon was, I imagine, cooler than before. Perhaps the girl was cold. Perhaps I was heavier than she expected. Perhaps she had underestimated the distance to her destination, or perhaps she had not considered the exertion required to bear me such a distance. Whatever the reason, the girl was unsteady, both in gait and breath. She stumbled, tripped, fell. I braced for the shattering, the splintering of my body into shards and the light behind my glass and eyes to be snuffed out, all because of one errant step. Then, all at once, my field of view twisted. I was facing landmarks I had not yet seen. The shattering never came. Instead, the girl let out a yelp and a curse. For a moment, we did not move, though the girl's breathing was labored and stuttering, and she let out soft groans every time she moved from then on. After her brief respite, she stood, and I was once again facing the path we had walked up until the moment of the stumble. Landmarks I had seen only briefly rematerialized in my view as the girl continued her trek, slower now. Before much longer, she set me down within her vehicle and fastened me to its seat without haste, before herself entering beside me. When we reached her abode and she bore me up the rather sturdy steps, I was met with a nearly barren room. There were furnishings, sure, but none so well appointed as what I'd been accustomed to by this time. Still more than the dumpster by the alley in any case, and so I chose not to dwell on its shortcomings. She sat me down on top of the chest of sorts and arranged amongst two others of my ilk, though I suspected them non-sentient. So too were they non-porcelain. Finding with the exact placement, the girl leaned the raggedy dolls against my sturdier frame. She pulled away, satisfied with her work, and left my side for the first time since we had met. Out of my view by this point, I tracked the fading sounds of her rhythmic footfalls until even they were gone, and I was left in a still room with naught but my yarn-haired company keeping vigil beside me. Neither of them spoke, moved, nor so much as shifted in posture throughout the silence that followed, though neither did I. The residents groaned only rarely thereafter, settling wood and distant pipes offering the sole evidence that the world beyond the room still stirred at all. I remained as I had been placed, unmoving, unblinking, unable to turn my head, let it draw notice, unable even to confirm the doorway remained empty. In the light from the window behind me, dust swirled in slow descent. I followed each mote as far as my fixed gaze allowed, until it slipped beyond my field of view, leaving nothing again to observe. Some time passed before the girl's steps reverberated in the room once more. Refusing still to move my eyes, I could only stare ahead at the wall until the girl reappeared in my periphery with a slow, tired, and sore step, which to my estimation, her minor injury should not be causing. Something about her posture, her look, her movement signaled an exhaustion far deeper than physical. I wished to help that girl. In that moment, I so desperately wished to alleviate her sorrows in what ways I could manage, but I had learned all too recently what cruelty awaits dolls who talk. So among the muslin and cotton bodies of my peers did I sit, unmoving, unblinking, watching as the girl, my new owner, meandered about her residence. She was a sad thing by any metric available, new and old. I know not what she did between rooms or what the noises emanating from those rooms implied, though eventually the girl did sit down and turn on the television, a device I was familiar with, as my previous owners had used theirs a few times for the purposes of entertaining their guests. My new owner, however, seemed only to entertain herself with it. From my vantage, I could not see what program the girl had chosen to amuse herself with, though I could hear fragments of speech without context, mentions of soft brushes, of damp and lint-free cloth, of gap-filling adhesives and specialty powders only available through select merchants and professionals. Most telling of all, from the box came the word porcelain. Over the next week or so, I came to know my new owner's habits. She would eat very little, and what she did eat was consumed quite slowly. Once she came into the room with wet hair, but only once. She would leave for hours at a time and return with a noticeably melancholic demeanor, sometimes holding parcels, sometimes not. Always, though, she would walk straight over to us, myself and the other dolls. She would lean close. She would stroke our hair, or in any case, my hair and their yarn. She would mutter sweetlings to us. "Don't worry," she would whisper to me. "I won't break you. I promise." On nights where she did not retire immediately following this part of her ritual, often she would turn on the television and once more be enthralled by her program. The strained tones of the woman's voice coming from the device would instruct on the intricacies of the technique for a proper running stitch, and my owner would sit in rapt attention, taking in every detail from the one-way communication as she practiced with a scrap of fabric in her lap. Finally, the routine broke one night when the girl burst through the front door, jumping up and down excitedly. "It's here! It's here!" she exclaimed, bouncing around with a parcel in hand, before then slicing the bindings holding it with an almost comedically ironic level of care. She began unloading the contents of the parcel, revealing bags and containers of an unidentifiable substance. She then approached the chest on which she had perched me nights ago, towering over me. I felt especially diminutive then, in a way I had not since the serendipitous moment at the dumpster. She grabbed me. She stripped me. Porcelain which had not seen lamplight nor daylight in decades lay bare, every curve of my body terrifyingly visible. She did not stop at my clothes, but thereafter removed my hair as well. This was not a quick process, as the adhesive that bound my wig to my crown had held fast for decades. My owner took a knife and picked at the dried flakes and peeled my locks from my scalp. She laid me, bald and naked now, upon a table and disappeared with my accessories. Normally, as I heard the footsteps retreating deeper into the residence, into rooms I had never seen before, I would focus on some point within my vision. However, the new landscape I was suddenly faced with made this strategy fruitless. Here, atop this table, was the only torture of beholding a truly barren landscape. An expanse of white ceilings stretching endlessly past my periphery, a sight less preferred than even the view from the alleyway. I heard sounds from another room, but as before, I dared not turn to face it. Minutes dragged on until a hush befell the residence once more. Mercifully, I heard footsteps begin to encroach. My owner returned and at once began to touch me, wiping my body down with a cloth and liquid which did not look to be water. Soon she moved on to applying an off-white powder, which nestled its way into every crack of my skin, I could feel it lodging itself uncomfortably in every crevice, every fold, every nook and cranny. My owner took a brush and each of the cracks in my porcelain, and as the powder was brushed away, I felt it exfoliate layers of grime and dirt accumulated from many years, perhaps approaching a century of neglect. She applied a substance upon me next. I felt it, too, mold to the marrs of my skin. This substance was different, very near liquid. It seeped into the small cracks and left not a hair's breadth of space between it and myself. With a different brush now, she smoothed it, humming a jaunty tune to herself all the while. I could feel the way this substance warped within me, how it merged with me. I understood. This was my new skin. Once finished with her molestation, my owner simply left me there upon the tabletop, again. While I was left to count every hairline crack in the ceiling for hours, left to wonder, to fear, I began to question what I was being forced to become now. The cracks, as hideous as they were undeniably mine, a part of me. What happens when they are replaced? When this was over, would I still be me? As time passed, I felt the concoction within my body harden, pressing against the shell from the inside. Just when I thought I could not apply more pressure against its ever-fragile casing, it proved me wrong. Minute after minute. When finally my owner arrived at my side again, despite being the cause of them, I could not help but feel my anxiety as I lay at her visage dancing in my periphery as she gathered yet another tool. I will be okay, I told myself silently. No matter what discomfort she puts me through, she will not break me. She has assured me of this, time and time again. I would silently repeat this reassurance for the remainder of the ordeal. The next instrument was applied liberally all along the surface of my body. This one appeared to be a rag of sorts, its coarse fibers scaped and peeled off my skin, both porcelain and solution, old and new. She blew on me, dusting off whatever shavings remained. She grinned down at me. She looked pleased, and so I was pleased. She then rubbed my eyes with cotton. When she had finished, I felt I could see clearer. I could see the teeth in her smiling face. I could see strands of hair sticking out from her updo. I could see my owner in all of her own cracks and imperfections, so too thinly masked as mine now were. Along with my sudden clarity, also re-arrived my dignity as my owner began to redress me. The clothes were clean and pressed. They had never fit so well as they did in that moment. Finally, a wooden spade applied a new adhesive to my head, which then restuck my wig, curlier than before, lighter, perhaps shorter too. I had the privilege of seeing my owner giddily bounce up and down, squealing with excitement, the happiest I'd ever seen her. So pleased with the progress of her undertaking, her reaction caused me an impromptu moment of reflection. If I was not me by the end of this night, would that be okay after all? The old me, the original me, never brought her such happiness. I could tell she was tired when she hoisted me back up, drained from her multi-hour efforts. Even so, she carried me to a mirror hanging near the door. "Look at you," she chirped proudly as she held me up to gaze at my reflection. All the while, she adjusted my newly cut bangs with her free hand. Then, more so than ever before, I was thankful for the stiffness of my skin. Had the contours of my face been any more malleable at that moment, I would surely have given myself away smiling. She trudged back over to the chest upon which I had made my throne and set me down. From beside me, she retrieved one of my neighbors. Emboldened by her previous success, she would try to sew this one. I watched as she brought it to the table and inspected it carefully, locating all of the worn spots, and especially the burst seams. She began slowly, with great care. Then, through either increased confidence or decreased patience, she began to sew faster, turning the doll quickly, as if eager to finish sooner, until a rip sounded, carried far enough for me to hear from across the room. No, 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 no. I could hear her whimper, voice tight with emotion as the doll's arm hung uselessly by the thread, off-white cotton bursting from what was once a shoulder. Large puffs of the doll's yellowing insides fell onto the table. This is no grave matter, I thought to myself, naively, upon witnessing the scene. The girl has been set back a step, but she need only continue. I reasoned. That was not so. I had underestimated the colossal significance of this doll to my owner, which was only fair. I knew not how long my owner was in possession of this or the other raggedy acquaintance currently sitting beside me. I could observe only how worn they both were. Rather than continue with the refurbishment as I expected, my owner set the doll down and hid her face, sobbing quietly, from what I could tell. I found it difficult to reconcile the happy figure from before with the girl I had known these past weeks, but this figure before me, the sunken and hollow, the weeping giant before me, this was far too familiar. How selfish was I, to fear shattering when my owner was bound by ties far more fair than even the fragile porcelain of my body. It was then I resigned myself to an unthinkable risk to aid my benefactor. That night, once my owner retired to her chambers with tears still drying upon her face, I waited until I was certain she had fallen asleep, and then I waited more. By then, I'd exhausted every excuse not to proceed, though certainty and caution warred within me, certainly held the edge long enough to will myself to go through with my decision. For my new owner, for my light, for my savior, for my caretaker, for my family, I would move. I first checked to see if I still could, if the newly augmented components of my body were made too stiff, too unlubricated for my joints to glide over one another. A bend of the fingers, a twist of a wrist. To my reluctant satisfaction, no such issue was present. Hesitation reared once more in my mind before I steeled myself. I rolled over onto what would anatomically be considered my stomach and looked out the window I had been in front of all this time. Water. Unsure whether this was a river, sea, pond, ocean, or other, I took a moment to gaze upon the dark waters in the distance, lit dimly by the light of an odd vehicle here and there along its surface. I had never seen water before. When finished appreciating the vista, I returned to my objective. Slowly, I began crawling backwards until my legs hung over the edge of my perch. I began my descent then, climbing ever so gingerly down to the floor. Gingerly indeed, for the stakes had never been higher. No. My personal concern about exploding into shards and dust had not allayed, but beyond even that, a new anxiety was beset upon my conscience, that if I were to shatter now, so too would my owner. I was sure of it. Once my shoes touched tile, I tested my gait, unsteady as the girl's on the day she found me. I moved even closer to the table across the room, knowing now, if the girl were to return for any reason, I was too far removed from my base to retreat. What my owner could clear in mere paces took me minutes, shuffling slowly and unstably. Once I reached the high chairs, I hoisted myself up. In her haste to wallow in her misery, my owner had left everything just as it was, sewing materials and doll both, and so I got to work. To claim I was ever, or am now, a master seamstress would be dishonest. My rigid fingers lacked the dexterity required, and my practice with the technique is, rather obviously, inconsistent at the best of times. However, I was sentient to see the advent of combustion automobiles. I know a thing or two. I began by stumbling the innards of the torn doll back inside of it. I collected what I could, but the smallest of its viscera lay on the table still, unable to be picked up by one designed such as I. Having mostly restored the body, I got to work with the needle and thread. The process was arduous, and I kept imagining every creak of the house to be my owner's door opening, which would swiftly lead to my discovery. Every missed thread through the eye of the needle, every lopsided entry into the flesh of my companion sent me back minutes at a time. I had no teeth to snap the line once the stitch was complete, and so I'd place it down, take the scissors in both hands, and snip. I too lacked the dexterity to tie the knots, so I left a long strand of suture hanging, begging to be tied. Dawn began to creep into the window as I had pulled the last of my cotton companion's flesh together. I organized everything back into the places I had found them, as if that would fool the girl whose doll would have otherwise magically had its arm reattached in the dark of the night. I climbed down slowly from the chair and shuffled as fast as my stiff body could move me back to the chest, my throne, for however much longer. I pulled myself upon it, gazing once more out at the water from the window. The early morning light danced and shimmered across the surface. It was even more beautiful in the daytime. I took a moment to come to terms with the fact that this may be the last time I see the water. I turned myself around and positioned myself as the girl always had me, my hands together, resting primly in my lap, my legs crossed only at the ankles, and I looked ahead, allowing my shoulders to drop limp as though the last of my life had drained from my body. Every moment thereafter was beautiful agony. At once, I wished for the girl to emerge, to see everything was okay, to see my gift to her and realize she need not feel sorrow any longer, or at least not for a moment, a peaceful moment. But accompanying this desire was the painful reality that this was the last moment of normalcy between the girl and myself. As soon as she emerged, she would see it. The very gift that should alleviate her sadness will also change my life forever. Following her egress, it took her a while to notice anything different. She seemed to avoid the object of her despondence. It wasn't until midday where she finally sucked in a breath and turned to face the devastation, only instead replace her dejection with perplexion. She slowly crept towards the table and picked up the doll, much slower than she had previously handled it, and scrutinized every inch of it, absorbing the details of my shoddy, uneven stitches. Still clearly bewildered, she placed the doll down and took the extremely long strand of floss and began tying it. Once finished, she turned to face me directly. I could see her thoughts cycle on her face until she arrived at the only remaining conclusion. There could be no other explanation. Without outwardly trying to rationalize this as anything else, she walked towards me, the slowest I've ever seen her walk, as if approaching a scared animal, or perhaps cautiously closing the distance between herself and what she imagines might lunge at her at a moment's notice. She never took her eyes off mine. I could feel them boring holes through my own freshly cleaned glass marbles. She stopped, by my estimation, less than a foot away. Her eyes searched every inch of my face. I stared ahead, unmoving, unblinking.